Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm sorry this audio isn't the best, I know. Welcome to the RTM State of the Town. Today is Monday, December 11th. I'm Krista McNamara, the Darien Town Clerk. I'm calling the meeting to order. We have a quorum with 5 of our 6 districts reporting with an attendance of 59 people. Before we get on to business, before I hand the meeting over to your moderator, Seth Morton, I'd like to welcome the 2 newest members of the RTM. District 5 has just caucused in, and I have sworn in Katie Lebesco, if you could stand up, Katie, and Michelle Donzizer. Welcome both to the RTM. We still have some openings remaining in 2 other districts, District 1 and District 2, and I will report on those at our next meeting. So without further ado, your moderator, Seth Morton.
Thank you, Krista. Welcome, everybody. I can see by the sparkle in your eyes that Santa Claus is coming to town. Everybody's happy. Before I do acceptance of the agenda, I'm asking, without objection, to move item 6, vote on the final Board of Ethics, to move that right up after approval of minutes. We need a little more time to count the votes. It's all by hand, no machines. So are there any objections to doing that? Thank you. Then I'll take a motion to accept the agenda. Without objection, actually I'll accept it, and I'll move right along. Are there any objection to accepting it? Okay. Then approval of the minutes for the November 13th meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Jim. Second? Way in the back. What's your name?
Rachel Taylor.
Rachel Taylor. There we go. Seconds. Good. Are there any changes? Whatever? No? Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I hear none. Any abstentions? I don't see any. If you have any, you can give them to Krista. Next item is a vote on the final Board of Ethics position. And to help us with that, Krista.
Okay, as you recall, at our last, actually, take a step back. Beginning in the 2023 term, the Board of Ethics, for those of you who weren't here, is a 5-member board, and 3 openings occurred with terms expiring this year. At our last meeting, we voted in, there were 6 candidates who were nominated and accepted their nomination. We voted as a body, and 2 of those 6 candidates were elected. Per Robert's rules, only 2 were elected of the 3 available slots because the other 4 candidates did not achieve the majority vote needed in order to fulfill that role. So tonight, you're going to vote again for 1 candidate amongst 3 nominees. 1 candidate has decided to withdraw her nomination, Barbara Thorne. So you all have your ballots. Barbara Thorne is, again, has withdrawn her nomination. The 3 candidates you have are Meg Bott, John Vesey, and Patrick Keane. If any of those 3 candidates would like to have a 2-minute speech to reintroduce yourselves to the body, please come up and do so. Meg? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I won't need 2 minutes, but just to reiterate what I said last time I was up here, I moved to Darien in 2010. We have 2 children in the high school. This is my 4th year on the RTM, and I was nominated for this committee in particular, possibly because it's a different perspective. I'm relatively new to the RTM compared to some of the esteemed colleagues already on the committee, and I would be very happy to be a part of it. And I want to keep this very short. So I appreciate your vote, and thank you. That's it.
John Vesey? No. Okay. John Vesey with your other candidate, and we have... Okay. With no more speeches, if you could now vote and then pass your vote over to your district chair, please.
Best Hope was cited as vice chair, and that was yeah. You're vice chair. Sorry about that. I did. She said make a motion. But I want to just put eyes on it myself. She said she corrected it online, but I don't know if she corrected it.
And I really want to sleep tonight, so.
Okay, good evening. Confirming, has everybody cast their ballot for the Board of Ethics position? All our ballots are in? Okay, great, thank you.
He'll ask for, okay, after he hears that.
Okay, I'm going to proceed with the meeting while we're counting. Next item on the agenda is update on Great Island from Mark Adaletta, our representative. Yes, sir.
We have 2 other committees, I think, speaking. I was not prepared to present tonight.
Say again?
We have
You're going to go with the folks?
Yes,
All right, all right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Then the next item would, on the agenda would be A vote on the acquisition of additional property rights for Great Island. Speaking on behalf of Planning, Zoning, and Housing, Amy Zavatakis.
Thank you. I apologize for going out of order, but before we start with this, we do need to make a motion to amend the minutes. We just noticed that in our district, our vice chair is listed incorrectly.
Oh, all right. If the body is, has no objection to that, then we'll note that the minutes of the November 13 meeting have been amended to show the correct vote for vice chair in District 5.
Can we say that verbally what the,
Yes.
well, it was recorded. The minutes were actually correct, it was the submission of the vote was incorrect, but if you'd like to correct it for the record now, that's fine.
Okay, what I saw in the minutes had listed as Beth Pope as the vice chair for District 5. The correct vice chair for District 5 is Mac Patrick.
The submission, though, mentioned Beth Pope as the vice chair, so the minutes reflected the papers that were submitted.
Okay.
But
not-
It was a transcribed error. It was a transcribed error.
Okay, I think we know where we're going with this.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you can hear it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I got it, Amy.
Thank you.
And now, Amy Zavatakis.
Sorry for making a long night even longer. Hi, I'm Amy Zavatakis, District 5, Chair of the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee. I'm moving Resolution 2329, consideration and action on approval of the purchase of the Great Island Road cul-de-sac and modification of certain easements. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. Without objection, I'll waive reading of the resolution. On December 7th, the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee held a special meeting to discuss this resolution. We had 8 members of our 14-person committee present, representing a quorum. We were joined at that meeting by Selectman Monica Canali and Town Council. During the meeting, we discussed the purchase and sale agreement that everyone in this body should have received a copy of between the Town of Darien and the Ziegler Family Trusts, as well as a number of revised easements which were attached thereto. I'm going to refer to the Ziegler family as the seller as I move forward. The purchase includes 3 distinct but interrelated pieces. The transfer of the cul-de-sac traffic circle at the end of Great Island Road to the Town of Darien, the modification of certain existing easements, and the transfer of $792,000 to the buyer, the contract purchaser of the property currently owned by the Ziegler family. I'm going to discuss each of these pieces in turn. So, as you may recall, when the town purchased the property, which we commonly refer to as Great Island, we really purchased 3 separate parcels. There was the access way that goes through the columns, which is referred to as Lot 23A, and then there were 2 lots that make up the body of Great Island down by the water. At the end of the access way parcel, between the accessway and the Great Island parcels is the Great Island Road cul-de-sac, which visually looks like a traffic circle, so people have used those 2 phrases interchangeably, cul-de-sac, traffic circle. The first part of the transaction will transfer ownership of this circular piece of land to the town, and that piece will be merged into Lot 23A. Once this transfer is complete, the town will own property extending from Pear Tree Point Road all the way through to Great Island. One of the questions that was raised by our committee that I'd like to just address directly to the body is whether any environmental testing was done on this parcel. And Selectman McNally did confirm for our committee that there was environmental testing done and there's no reason to believe there's any contamination on this new piece that we'll be acquiring. The next piece of the transaction is the modification of a number of existing easements. The easement modifications will accomplish the following. The lots within the Ziegler property had already been subdivided some time ago, so I'll refer now to the Ziegler subdivision. The lots within the Ziegler subdivision that currently have an easement over parcel 23A will continue to have easements over 23A, but this will now include the cul-de-sac. The lots that abut 23A, which have the right to install driveways from their lots onto the roadway onto 23A, will continue to have those driveway rights. The town has agreed to install a 5-foot buffer on Lot 23A between any town-constructed roadway and the abutting lots within the Ziegler subdivision. It is anticipated that within this 5-foot buffer area, there will be a sidewalk for pedestrian traffic. It should be noted that this roadway that the town will be constructing will not be a town road. It will not meet the requirements to be considered a town road. It is really, in a sense, a shared driveway between the town and these individual property owners. The town will have a right to use Great Island Road and Ziggy Way for emergency access and utilities only. Those roads are otherwise private roads whose use is limited to the parcels with easement rights over the road. The town will have the right to use the driveway from the cul-de-sac that cuts through the southerly open space parcel for any type of ingress and egress. For those of you that have been down there, as you approach the cul-de-sac, there's sort of a straight way into Great Island Road, and then there's another road a little to the right that goes through a open space parcel. That's the road that I'm talking about right now. This will allow the town to basically have a one-way traffic loop all through the 2-lot Great Island Road, which is down by the water. I just did want to note, because again, this came up during our meeting, that the town's Environmental Protection Commission did have to agree, and they have voted and agreed, to the amendment to that open space, the open space restriction on, the open space restriction on that parcel in order to accomplish this last change. But no modification is being made to any of the conservation restrictions that would otherwise impact the environmental protection of that area. It's really just has to do with this roadway and the fact that it will be open for town ingress and egress. The last piece of this transaction is the town will be paying $792,000 to the buyer under contract of the Ziegler properties, which will allow this buyer to have funds available to construct screening between the lots on the Ziegler subdivision and the town-owned properties. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved the mandatory referral on this purchase on December 6th. On December 7th, the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee voted unanimously in favor of the proposal, and we recommend the same to the full RTM. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Very concise, given the complexity, huh? Now, speaking on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis, Chair.
I'm Jack Davis, District 3, RTM Finance and Budget Committee Chair. Thank you, Amy, for an excellent report. Our report will address the financial aspects of this resolution. There are 4 financial aspects of this acquisition. The first one was, can funds be used from the prior resolution authorizing the appropriation and bonding of Great Island acquisition to be used for this additional purchase? The second, what is the value of the property? What are other purchase costs associated with this purchase, and what are just other costs? The first part of this report was recognized in a memorandum from the town's bond attorney, Pullman and Comley, dated November 20th, 2023, and it stated, quote, "We reviewed the law and have determined that the town may pay $792,010 of the $103,465,000 appropriated for the project and issue bonds to finance such appropriation for the abutting land purchase in accordance with the resolution." In English, that basically says the purchase of the abutting property and other related costs may be interpreted to be considered part of the original appropriation previously passed by the RTM. So that's not an issue at all. In answering the next 2 questions, the town will pay $792,010 for this purchase. An amount of $10 will be paid to the Ziegler Trust. In addition, $792,000 will be paid to a designee instructed by the seller's attorney. The property is valued at $564,000. The difference being hard and soft costs of the landowner or landowner's designee may incur associated with screening, costs associated with changing the easement verbiage, security, although the funds need not be used for any of those purposes. The committee was satisfied that the access issue and the potential cost of future litigations were resolved with this purchase agreement. Lastly, and I'm going to mention it, and I'm just going to waive it that none of you can actually see the numbers on here, but the fact of the matter is that there's often in this body questions of what we've spent on Great Island. On a monthly basis, in the Board of Finance packet, there is an accounting of Great Island funds expended to date associated with the original purchase and subsequent expenditures. For everyone who's just dying to go on their phone and see what they are, on last month's November package on page 31 has all those expenditures. And it's a worthwhile reading of the Board of Finance package anyway, but that has lists all the costs. I'm not going to go through all of them. What I will go through is that the legal fees. The legal fees through October 16th, actually through November 16th, primarily associated with the acquisition, currently approximate about $150,000. That is also part of the expenditures that we're allowed to use based upon the original appropriation for the acquisition that we improved in this body. The RTM Finance and Budget Committee approved this resolution unanimously and recommends the same to the full RTM. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Are there any other committees that wish to report? Town officials? Okay. Members of the body? Comments, questions? Okay. Electors of the town? I see none. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please rise. Okay, opposed, please. Abstentions? See none. Okay, item 2329 passes 70 in favor, 1 no, 3 abstentions. I have it on good authority that we'll have something on the Board of Ethics after we hear from John Zagroski, First Selectman for the state of the town.
Hi there. I'm a little out of practice giving these speeches, so bear with me. I'll see if I can get through this. So let's start off tonight with a thank you. I would like to extend my thanks, and I think I can extend it on behalf of this body, to Monica McNally. Monica had the courage to run for the job that I hold now and win a competitive race. She had the courage to face the prospect of the Great Island acquisition about 10 minutes after she took office, and seeing it through to completion. She had the courage to transition back to a selectman role and take on the long-term task of making sure Great Island was a success. You know, it says a lot about the RTM that 8 years of service in this body produces a leader like that. So I'm not sure what the standards are in the RTM for a standing ovation, but I would like to give one to her tonight. If you would please stand. Monica McNally. I appreciate that. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about where we're going as a town. So during the campaign, we had a little phrase for our team that was 2 things. One was protecting what we have, and the second one was building for the future. So I'm going to talk briefly about those 2 things. So the first one is this notion of protecting what we have. And a couple of points that I'd bring up about it that I think bring that to life are, frankly, maintenance. If you look around town, there's always something to criticize, but the amount of effort that goes into trying to maintain the assets that we have here in town, whether it's our parks, our roads, our buildings, they are all in remarkably good shape. And the good thing is that we have a team in Parks and Rec, but also in Public Works, that works every day trying to keep these assets in good shape. Just some recent examples that are kind of hard to see, but when you spend time with the people who work on them, it's quite amazing. We have flooding problems in this town, and I'll talk a little bit more about the projects that we have in place that are moving forward. But did you know how much time we spend actually maintaining flood assets? The Roten Heights detention system, Hanson Road improvements, Long Neck Point drainage, all of these different projects are underway, even now, where they're trying to make sure that the assets we have in place and the drainage that we have in place works as intended when we need it. And I'd just like to applaud the folks who spend time on all this. It's very important. They're also spending time on wastewater projects, again, stuff that you would never see. But if Public Works was not spending time on that, we'd have a lot of problems, and they do a good job at that. And I point all this out just because sometimes people will look and see some of these projects and wonder, really, do we have the team focused on these assets that are keeping them in good shape long term? And I've spent time with those guys since I've been in office, and I can tell you they work tirelessly at it all the time, and I certainly am thankful, and I hope you guys are as well. There's a few things that you'll get to know about me that I'm not in favor of. One of them is deferred maintenance. I don't like deferring maintenance, and the reason is that it puts these types of assets that you don't see frequently, it puts those assets at risk, and then one day it comes back to bite us. We've got enough resources and talent in this town to maintain our assets, and I would push everybody to never accept deferrals of important maintenance on the things that we have. So another thing that I think about protecting what we have is this notion of relationships. So my predecessors, Monica, Jamie, and others, and Yvonne, everyone before me, has spent a lot of time thinking about relationships with other officials. It's relationships not just in this town, but other local officials, state officials, federal officials. If we think about trying to protect what we have, we need to have a dialogue with those individuals. We've done a good job at building those relationships, and I intend to spend a lot more time on that myself. These officials outside of Darien are quite powerful and can make our lives better or worse. It's very important that we maintain an open dialogue with them. We talk about what they're doing, and when we see that there's a misalignment of interests, that we spend time trying to correct that and work with them to make sure that it doesn't create problems for our town. I applaud everyone before me who spent time building those relationships. This certainly has my full attention, and I'll be spending a lot of time making sure that those relationships work for us. The third and last area that I want to talk a little bit about in terms of protecting what we have has to do with people. And as a town, we've only started to begin to focus on this. As you know, we have the Mental Health Task Force that has been chartered recently and that has done some really fine work under the leadership of Valerie Ramstack and Marcy Minnick, who's on the Board of Selectmen. That is an incredibly important effort, and I applaud what they've done. Frankly, if I could make every single citizen in this town an honorary member of that committee, I would. The mental health crisis in this country is quite serious, as you all know. David Brooks recently gave a TED Talk where he was talking about this. 35% of Americans over 45 feel chronically lonely. And that's actually something I know Senator Chris Murphy is focusing on, this issue of loneliness and isolation, and I applaud him for that, and I look forward to learning more. Only 8% report having meaningful conversations with their neighbors. Only 32% trust their neighbors, and among millennials, that number is 18%. The fastest growing political group is unaffiliated. The fastest growing religious group is unaffiliated. Suicide rates are up 30% since 1999, and for teenagers, it's 70%. Unfortunately, Darien has its own story with these statistics. I empathize greatly with the families who have suffered or are continuing to suffer. All I can offer is my own experience. I lost an uncle to suicide, though it has been more than 30 years since that day. They say that time heals all wounds. Frankly, I've not been able to confirm that in my own case. He was the life of the party, the funniest family member by far, and literally the last person that anyone suspected was in trouble. We discovered later that he had planned it for a year. In any event, give some thought as to how you might help advance the state of mental health in this town, in your neighborhood, your circle of friends, your colleagues in town government. Who is the most isolated person that you know of? The holidays might be a good time to reach out. Let me turn now to sort of building for the future. So probably the most obvious thing that's going on right now is all the building that you see every day in this town, and it's really quite something. I have to give a shout out to all the developers who have been involved in all of this, particularly the big ones, Federal Realty that is 99.9% finished with the Norton Heights project, and then of course Palmer's that's just getting started with the Vacaros, and last but not least, of course, David Genovese and Baywater Properties with Corbin Drive. The governor was here about a month ago, and David was giving a presentation about some of the work that he did and all of our efforts, not just with these projects, but to try and meld affordable housing as part of all that. And the governor, quite tellingly, said, you know, this is really terrific. I've got a political problem. He says, I see how you guys do all of this. What do I tell these other towns that maybe they could replicate from what we're seeing in Darien. And David had this just fantastic response. Without being bombastic, he said, well, it's the developers. And what he meant by that was those developers took the time to go to the relevant commissions, the town officials, this group, to say, what's going to work with you guys? What do you want to see? What do you not want to see? And they spent a lot of time trying to make sure that they understood that. So when they came forward with these projects, some of which included a lot of affordable housing, it worked for Darien. It worked for Darien. And all these other towns, if they could take a lesson from Darien's playbook, I think you'd actually find a lot smoother development processes. But we have these great projects that you see today because of this tremendous cooperation between these developers who get it and town officials who know what they want and, importantly, what they don't want. So this holiday season, you see a lot of new retailers out there. We're about to get a lot more. So for no points, everybody should be spending money in Darien. So go find these businesses, go spend money there. All right, so we got a couple other projects. I mentioned flooding maintenance. What about those projects themselves? So we took a very holistic look at flooding that Monica started and the town staff continued. And what that attempted to do was to say, for all of Darien, after those terrible floods and storms in 2021, where can we invest some money that would make a difference in flooding? And we, as a Board of Selectmen, developed some criteria for those investments. What we didn't want was investments where you spend millions of dollars and 5 families benefit, or millions of dollars and it just moves the flooding downstream to some area that's not flooding today. Bad. We set some criteria that established standards for that, and after all of that, there were 2 big projects that we think make a difference and meet those criteria. One is over on Saltbox Lane, and the other one is Tilly Pond. So both those projects are underway right now with the design phase, which takes a long time because that includes state permitting and the approval of a lot of different boards. But for the Saltbox project, that process should be finished by January of 25, and the project takes about 12 months after that to finish. And then for Tilly Pond by June of 26, and it would take another 12 months after that. That may seem like a long time, and it is, but given these processes, state involvement, environmental concerns, a lot of stuff that's out of our control, those projects remain on track, and you should know that we're focused on those that were started when Monica picked this up. Ms. McCammon is going to talk a little bit about school investments. They're non-trivial. It started with Oxbridge. It's extending into HHR. I'll leave the overview of those projects to her, but I will say that for all that money, those investments reflect what has been a bedrock of Darien town government for decades, which is a commitment to the best possible education for our students. And I'm supportive of all this. I'm thankful for everyone who has served, is currently serving, or is unsuspectingly about to serve on a building committee for these projects. I said, by the way, that I was not a fan of deferred maintenance. The second thing I'm not a fan of, value engineering. We are paying the price today in some of our school buildings for having value engineered a few things out of those buildings to save money. I will pinch pennies until they scream, but I'm telling you right now, do not value engineer these buildings away from things you know we're going to need 5 years from now. Invest the money now, get it right today. Last thing I'll mention in terms of investments for the future is Great Island. Lord knows we've talked about that until the cows come home. And just again, thank you to Monica and Jim who have worked literally ceaselessly to get a lot of this done. Key members of that legal team are right here with us tonight. Wayne, Patty, and Bobby, stellar. These guys, their firm, absolutely indispensable with this process. Monica, as you know, is chairing the Great Island Committee now and going forward, and we'll work hard on this. I did want to thank you for your vote tonight to approve this acquisition of the traffic circle. It's the last piece in terms of the acquisition puzzle that enables us to do what we need to do with Great Island to move forward, so I'm excited about that. The committee is going to be charged with figuring out what to do. They're going to partner with professionals who think about development of large-scale municipal properties, and I look forward to that process. The only 2 things that I would mention just from my point of view that we ought to focus on, vehicular access is going to take a while. That 23A piece of property that was talked about here, that access road, that's going to require some development work, and we're not going to be able to get vehicular traffic onto Great Island until the summer, let's say. But there's no reason we can't move forward more quickly with pedestrian and bicycle access. And so I really would ask the committee to focus on that and figure out how we can get that done sooner so that our residents can actually enjoy the property sooner. Second, whatever the ultimate vision is for Great Island, we need to keep cost in mind. That was an $85 million acquisition. That is not a trivial amount of money. And it's a lot to spend, so it cannot be just a cost center in my judgment going forward. We need to figure out a revenue component. I don't know what that is or what form it will take, but having that as part of the overall plan, I think, is going to be something that's important, and the committee should seriously consider that. To wrap up this little piece, if anybody's been tracking all the debt that we've incurred for all this, that's not a small number. If you add in Ox Ridge for, call it $65 million, another $85 million for Great Island, the Henley Holmes Royal project, which is, I don't know, in the high, nearly $100 million. You add all that up, that's $250 million in debt that we've put on the town's balance sheet. That's $250 million. A lot of you may be concerned, what's that going to do to my taxes? And by the way, we've got inflation in some other areas that will become more clear, if it's not already clear, as part of the budget process that's about to come up. I've asked Mr. Palin and the Board of Finance to take a closer look at this and try to resurrect, as part of the budget process, that 5-year outlook so that you guys can be eyes open about what we're talking about in terms of tax implications. The one thing I would say is, because a lot of this work is bonded over a very long period of time, the tax impact will be smoothed over that long period of time, and so it's not something to panic about, but it's definitely something to watch out for, pay attention to, and make sure you get your questions answered. And certainly I will do that, Jim will do that, and others who are focused on this. Don't hesitate to ask questions. We'll try to make it as clear as possible during this process. A couple other comments. One is just on process and procedure. I'm a process and procedure kind of person. It is important to remember that over all these years, we've got lots of processes and procedures for considering things. Sometimes those processes are pretty small, and the town staff will just do it, and you'll never hear about it because it was a small investment. Other times it's really big, like the budget season. All of you are involved in that process, and that's really complicated. But this gives me a chance to touch on the Cherry Lawn Playground project that has come up recently. That's another thing that had a big process attached to it, and it's worth spending a minute or two on. They chartered a committee. They spent months working on this, something like 15 meetings over a period of time. They met with vendors. They saw presentations on this. They did field trips. They followed a process. And there was a lot of disagreement in that process. All the emails that I've seen kind of reflect that. I got emails while I was sitting here today, people concerned about this project. I've also gotten a ton of emails in support of this project, and it's hard to read through all that. Some of you are focused on the emails against it. You know, you'll be very convinced of that. I assure you that all the people on the other side who think this thing is fabulous beyond words, they're equally convinced. And so where we ended up was a divided committee that could not actually vote unanimously to recommend anything. So the process kicked in from there. The process is that we have chartered the Parks and Recreation Commission to make these decisions, and that's what they did. They took the lack of recommendation from their committee, and they made a decision because that's what they were chartered to do. And even that decision itself was not unanimous, but the process was followed, and they came to that decision, and that's what they did. And so I'd make these points about it. It's impossible for every decision that we make in government to be unanimous. The main thing is to ensure that we have good processes, plenty of time to comment, months of investigation. All of that, I think, reasonably was followed with regard to this project. But like at the national level, once a decision is made, we should respect that decision and then come together to work as hard as we can to implement it in the best possible way. Going forward, I would encourage everybody who's got a position or a point of view on this or any other topic to get and stay involved. TV 79 fabulously makes it very easy to be informed about all this stuff because all of these things are recorded and you can spend time on them. The future outcomes may not be to your liking, but you should never feel like you missed an opportunity to be heard, ever. Not in this town, not with all the coverage that we have. One other point that I want to make on this is that This has revealed for me that I think there's an opportunity to try and clarify some roles and responsibilities among our governing entities, trying to spell out with more clarity who does what and when, reducing overlap by defining what lanes different boards and different groups are supposed to play in. Board versus board, elected official versus town professionals, committee charters, all of that. I'm going to find a few folks and see if I can charter a committee to help us just take a step back and say, each group, whether it's the Board of Selectmen, the First Selectman, the RTM, the Board of Finance, or any of our other commissions, I think it's a good opportunity to try and sharpen that up a bit and say, are we clear about what each group is supposed to be doing and what all the processes are for this? Some of this we may not like and we might want to change, but I'd like to have a group come in and take a careful look at that, particularly maybe with some third-party help, just to sharpen that up a bit and give you guys some confidence, not just in all of these roles across the town, but frankly, even the role for the RTM. And I'll look for representation on this committee from members of this group. Finally, you've heard a little bit about the videos that I'm about to produce. I did one on the tax valuations here a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to get out of my other jobs. When I retire at the end of this year, I'll have a lot more time for this. But the purpose of all this is to provide short and succinct explanations on all kinds of stuff. It'll range from the more mundane, which is how our town government works, to stuff that's topical and top of mind, like the valuation process. But I'm going to try to do a series of those short videos to help not just all of you, but anybody in town get a clear, succinct, and accurate view about what's going on. I don't intend to put any opinions or points of view in it, but really just to report facts. I may change that in the future, but let's see. If you guys have got suggestions or topics that you'd like to see covered, I want to do that, but I want to make it something that you can quickly absorb on a quick train ride or right in the morning and say, I'm more clear on that because of that video. My objective, by the way, is that if you're watching these videos, by the end of this next year, people in town are going to be a lot more informed about what goes on in government, and I'll try to make hard to make those interesting, informative, of course, with my charming self that everyone loves. No, maybe not. Okay. In conclusion, I thank Monica, but I also want to thank a few other folks. Town staff, I got to know a lot of them in my prior roles over the last 15 years in government, but I've got to know even more since taking on the first selectman role. And frankly, I'm even more impressed. I'm not doing a department by department overview tonight, but everyone who works in town government should really know how much they're appreciated and valued, not just by me, but I think I can speak for everyone on the Board of Selectmen. We really, really appreciate what you do. I will put our town and our school professionals against any other municipal government in this country. I think they're fantastic. You guys are second to none, so thank you. I also need to do a shout out to our volunteers. They are amazing. The amount of time and talent that's spent by these individuals for no pay is just amazing. And I know the stress can take a lot out of you. I mean, this playground process, I know several of you were really stressed out by this process, and it was a very difficult time. But this type of commitment is what makes Darien such a great place to live. And when our debates get passionate, I would ask you to remember who's on the other side of that argument. A fellow Darien resident, volunteering, missing dinner at home, and trying to make a difference just like you. Remember what I said about mental health and the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. And if we can do that, we're going to get a lot better at managing our differences. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and best wishes to everyone, however you plan to celebrate this season. Thank you.
Okay. We have a result on the vote for the Board of Ethics, and under Robert's rules, nobody got a majority. So here's what I'm going to do, okay? I'm not going to hold our speakers here while we go through another vote. So after our speakers speak, I'll ask for a show of hands on how many would like to stay here and vote one more time and see if we can reach a conclusion on Board of Ethics. We needed 35 votes. and nobody got there. Closest was 28. So, if folks are not going to sit and vote again, we'll put it on the January agenda. So there's a deal. I'll be back to you after Jim Palin speaks, but for now we will proceed with the Chair of Planning and Zoning Commission, Steve Mulvaney.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me. I think Jeremy's going to get his little TV screen working. Get a little bit softer lights. Lighting director. Jim Cameron's retired now, right? That's a great slide. Can you make it a little bit higher, Jeremy? Wow, now hold on, let me turn on this baby. I got some special. No, I got some special thing. I can't see spit. I got one of these things that doesn't work either, but it's all right. That's a good idea. That's a good. Frank Kemp's got a cell phone. Look how smart this guy is. Wow, look at this. Everybody see that? There's only 27 slides, so you'll be okay. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, my fellow elected officials, and the people of Darien here and watching at home on TV 79. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Mulvaney, the Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'm glad to be here with you tonight. This is always a fun evening for me. I enjoy this speech and being with you guys annually. I was recently re-elected as the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm excited to deliver my report again to tell you the state of Darien's Planning and Zoning Department and the local real estate market. Some of the reasons why I like being on the Planning and Zoning Commission is that I'm very proud of what we have done here and accomplished in Darien, and also I'd like to see all the major projects through to completion. As you will hear tonight, there are quite a few of them. In my remarks to the RTM, I always take the opportunity to formally thank members who have decided to no longer serve and welcome new members who have either been appointed or elected. This year, though, I do want to thank all the board members as they take time out of their lives to make Darien a better place. Recent changes to state statutes require additional training for some board members, requiring even more of a time commitment on behalf of the members of the land use committees. I'm continually impressed with the folks who do decide to serve, so thank you to everyone. This year, a special thanks goes out to the Planning and Zoning staff, especially Greer and Joanne, who are the two women that work in the Planning and Zoning office. Over the past 2 years, we have transitioned to online permitting via OpenGov. And the secretaries have been fantastic in assisting homeowners, builders, and developers. They've also been instrumental in assisting all the land use board members in getting to use electronic packets where all the application materials are emailed out with links to save trees and hundreds of valuable town employee hours. Thank you to everyone. We also get these fancy iPad loaners, if anyone wants to get one, so if you do serve, you get an iPad. It's nice. During the past year and a half, we have seen unprecedented growth and development in Darien. The best way I can describe this to everyone is doubling down on Darien. Our grant list is growing. Our commercial grant list is nearing $1 billion. And with that, I'm honored to say that I was part of the group who met with the governor here in Darien, who wanted to see for himself with the State Director of Economic and Community Development what we're doing here in Darien. Governor Lamont and Director Down visited Darien in November, as Mr. Zagrodzky said, to meet with the developers of the big three projects and see the major redevelopment projects here in Darien. He was very impressed with the work that we are doing here and the approximate $400 million worth of real estate development that is currently in development, that's currently under construction. Thank you, Governor Lamont, for visiting Darien, Connecticut. Doubling down on Darien. As I've mentioned over the past few years, change is on the horizon. Well, I'm here to say that change is here and we are digesting it well. The year in 2023 has been a year of doubling down, and this is continuing. What I mean by this is that of the people who want to invest in real estate and development, many of them are choosing Darien. During the past year, I am pleased to say that Darien, we have seen a pattern of reinvestment that as a commercial real estate professional, I do have to take note. We have a number of local developers that have proven track records of success in Darien and want to create products and have created products that continue to add to the community. I'll speak more about that tonight and give you a peek into 2024. We also have a handful of national players that some of the largest and most well-respected real estate investment trusts in the country that continue to invest in Darien, Connecticut. While most institutional investors are sitting on the sidelines or pulling back from real estate, the REITs here in Darien and the local developers are doubling down. The three current local developers, three local commercial Class A buildings, owners and developers were recently purchased in the town of Darien in this year. Those are 1500 Post Road, 9 Old Kings Highway, and 23 Old Kings Highway. And also, Baywater Properties is about to construct a new 90,000 square foot Class A office building, and more than half of that building is already pre-leased. All these people are doubling down on Darien. I'll start off by noting the residential redevelopment that occurs in Darien every day. We have a number of local architects and builders who have constructed numerous residences throughout town and do fantastic work. The existing residents are also continuing to renovate and upgrade their homes. As soon I will explain that this work is an essential piece of Darien's grand list. Most years we see about 25 to 35 new residents constructed in Darien, and those are a key component of the grand list increase. Additionally, the town doubles down on itself. By expanding community facilities, all of which add to what makes Darien great. As you know, and have heard about the expansion and renovation plans for the 3 elementary schools, which likely will get started next year, and Jill will probably give us an update on that. We've also recently completed the beautiful new Oxford School that took a couple years and had a couple of different phases. The newest projects are the expansion of Weed Beach and the park swing sets. The town is in the final stages of approvals for the Weed Beach Meadows and Trail project, which, if approved, will substantially increase and nearly double the size of the improved beachfront, plus with better parking and other beautiful areas for residents to enjoy. Another project that the Planning and Zoning Commission recently approved is a conversion of a commercial building on the Post Road to create our first workforce housing project in Darien for volunteer firefighters in the Norotan Fire Station. This is an excellent example of finding ways to make Darien a better place and encouraging volunteerism in our fire departments. BMW of Darien is one of the largest town employers. They are in the process of completing a multi-million-dollar improvement project on their property, including a new car wash building, significant additions and alterations to other service buildings, and we're excited to see the work completed in 2024. It's great to see a successful business that wants to reinvest and double down in Darien and create additional jobs. Regency Centers, a real estate investment trust REIT, added to their portfolio in Darien by doubling their footprint. Regency now owns 2 properties in Darien, the Goodwife Shopping Center and the Trader Joe's Center at 430 Boston Post Road. Regency is one of the largest REITs in the entire country. You see what I mean by doubling down on Darien? The next is reinvestment. We talk about the big 3. Here we go. The first is the redevelopment of the Norotan Heights Shopping Center, which is across the parking lot from the Palmer's Market. The project is well underway. It is now known as Heights Crossing. The foundations for the 2 mixed-use buildings are nearly complete, and you will see the buildings come out of the ground right after the first of the year, with an expected completion date of 2025. As you can see in the slide, that the redevelopment will be consistent in size with the nearby federal project, Darien Commons, and it will continue to transform that entire block, which is still and always will be anchored by Palmer's Market. The project is being built by Joe and John Ficaro, 2 longtime Darien residents, whose company is called V20 Group. Joe and John have an excellent track record in town, completing more than 5 projects already, and most recently the back of Darien Playhouse and an upgrade to 9 Old Kings Highway South, one of Darien's largest commercial office buildings. The V20 Group makes it to my list of doubling downers. Next, we have the federal project in Norotan Heights, now called Darien Commons, which is nearly complete, with the final commercial tenants expected in early 2024. This project has brought some much-needed life to the block, especially in the evenings and on Saturday mornings at Gregory's Coffee. Their redevelopment is on the site of the former Stop and Shop grocery store, has created something new and exciting in Norotan Heights at the Darien train station. It is one of the most walkable commercial projects in town, connecting the neighborhoods to the north and east with the Norotan Heights train station by cutting through the entire center. I am pleased to say that Federal Realty, one of the largest real estate investment trusts in the country, has also decided to double down on Darien. They have chosen to further reinvest in our community by proposing upgrades to the existing building at 40 Heights Road, which many of you may know as Citibank or the Edward Jones building. They've also taken the opportunity to make significant improvements to the Equinox building both inside and outside. And in this case, the builder-developer again shows confidence in our town of Darien, in our small little town of Darien. Finally, the last major doubling down project, but not the least, is the Corbin District. By now, you're very familiar with Baywater Properties, a local developer run by the Genovese family that has completed a number of projects in the past 15 to 20 years. Way too many to itemize here. Needless to say, their work is very impressive and has improved our community time and time again. They've recently completed what I call Phase 1C, 3 replacement buildings on the east side of Corbin Drive. Phase 1 and Phase 1A and Phase 1B are 1020 Post Road and the 34 Old Kings Highway South, which is their headquarters. Phase 2, which has started, is on the west side of Corbin Drive and is about double the size of Phase 1. They have thankfully taken a break for a few weeks during the holiday season to minimize construction impacts so everyone can easily park, shop, walk, and drive in downtown Darien. It's my understanding that the relocated retailers in Phase 1 which opened during the summer, moved and transferred across the street without losing a step from their previous location, and in most cases are now doing better in their new storefronts. The foundations of the Phase 2 building are now underway, and the project will continue into 2025. I am optimistic that the results will be fantastic and a real improvement over the old buildings that used to sit on that full block. As you all may know, Baywater Properties, led by David Genovese and his team, are local. David started the Corbett District some 18 years ago. He went through the entire process, and when I first met him back then, he was all smiles and filled with excitement. Today, here in 2023 and almost 2024, David is still has the same energy, drive, and excitement, albeit a little bit more gray hair and glasses. Is David here? I asked his permission if I could say that, and he said yes. I'm a real estate guy, and I've been in the commercial real estate valuation analysis business for over 30 years, concentrating on new construction, urban, and suburban renewal. Well, we all know the results of all this redevelopment can be an inconvenience in a variety of ways. But I'm here to say that over the past year and a half, not one serious complaint has hit my desk, as well, maybe one did, of all the real estate development projects, and all the real estate projects are forging ahead smoothly. Thinking long-term, redevelopment projects will have a significant positive impact by increasing the overall grant list and providing us with numerous restaurants, retail, and housing options. The grant list is comprised approximately 85% of residential values. Jim Palin tonight will get further deep into the grant list. It's his bailiwick. But what I want to tell you is that all the new mixed-use projects and commercial projects, with that, will be nearing $1 billion in commercial value for our grant list. The economic impact of the big three is well in excess of $300 million. Right now, I think that's supposed to say 783, but you can't read it, but that's what it is. This development has the ability to shift some of the tax burdens away from homeowners and to commercial owners, and they need our support. Other towns in Fairfield County and the state are fascinated with our project, as John alluded to, both in the commercial and residential redevelopment worlds. That is part of the reason why Governor Lamont came to Darien with the Economic Development Director last month. As I've noted here, part of that can be attributed to doubling down builders and developers that have created value and a great community to be in for all of us. It's important to remember that what really makes these projects successful, the retailers and the restaurants, is you, the town residents. Please support the town retailers, as John alluded to. Shop, drink, and eat, and shop locally this holiday season and throughout the year. When we win, they win, and then we win again. All the taxes that these commercial property owners buys a lot of iPads for our public school kids and me, and also a lot of sand for our beaches. The residential growth graph shown now from the assessor's office pretty much summarizes everything. Residential property values, they continue to grow, they continue to increase. I think that's a win for all the homeowners in the town of Darien. Before I sign off, I do want to give you a flavor of what's ahead in 2024. First, you may be aware with the pending application for a new car wash at the former Bertucci's site at the east end of town, which is by a Darien-based multi-state company. Again, someone doubling down on our town. It is likely that the redevelopment of the 3 Parklands building will be underway soon as well into a new multifamily residential building. We are also likely to see the redevelopment of a number of other projects, including but not limited to Great Island. The Planning and Zoning Commission did issue a positive report about the potential acquisition of the cul-de-sac. Is consistent with the 2016 Plan of Conservation and Development. And thank you all here tonight for voting to support this initiative earlier this evening. Finally, what I want to cover tonight is accessory dwelling units, which is a further effort to diversify Darien's housing stock. In 2024, the Commission will decide how to address the planning and zoning regulation in accordance with state statutes and our peer communities. I expect we will have a public hearing or hearings in February, and we do want to hear from community members. So RTM members, please stay tuned to this topic and provide any feedback that you may have. There are many more accomplishments and initiatives that I can talk about, time permitting, but as you can see here, the state of the town of Darien, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Darien real estate markets are all doing great. We are very much a high-demand community in Fairfield County, and we want it to stay that way. So in conclusion, I want to wish you the best in 2024, and I look forward to updating you again a year from now, or anytime you want me to come for a town hall type presentation. Thank you all for your time, support, and attention. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Steve. Great. Now speaking on behalf of the Board of Education, Chair Joe McCammon.
Thank you all. Good evening, Seth and fellow RTM members. Thank you for hosting the Board of Education tonight. My name is Jill McCammon. I'm the current chair of the board. Many of you are used to seeing Duke Deneen up here, our former chair. Before I continue, I'd like to express my warmest thanks to him for his 9 years of service, 3 of which were at chair. He concurrently chaired the ORBC. Before that, he was vice chair and facilities chair, and he was an active member throughout. His focus on student voice and experience, top quality facilities, and relationship building within the board, among the boards, and with staff and administration means he's left a legacy for our students and families for years to come. Additionally, I would like to thank my fellow board members, Julie Best, David Brown, Greg Grambling, Katie Lublin, Dennis Maroney, Robin Nelson, Sarah Parent, and John Sini. We're a board of 9. Special thanks to Dennis Maroney for serving a 3rd term, and a warm welcome to Robin Nelson and Greg Grambling, who have recently joined us. Between all of us, we have 27 children who range in age from 1st grade to adults recently out of college. The 9 of us share a passion for how children learn and how schools teach them. The vision of the Darien School District is preparing all students to thrive in a changing world today, to thrive in a changing world tomorrow. Behind me, as I speak, you'll see some images of what that mission looks like for Darien Public Schools. There'll be students at many different ages and stages. I will not narrate through it. Whenever you're ready, Jeremy, thank you. But you'll see classrooms, common spaces, kids on stage and at play, for fun or in sport, and the buildings that house them. My thanks to Jeff DeMeo for his work in putting it together. Now, I know that I'm going to ask you to divide your attention, listen to me, and look at something that has nothing to do with what I'm saying. But for those of you who are tired of listening, you can look here, and if you want to hear me, I'll still be talking. Today, the all in preparing all of our students means 4,667 kids. 108 of those students are in our early learning program. Almost half, or 2,110, are in our 5 elementary schools. 1,048 are in our middle school, and 1,401 are at our high school. Our most recent enrollment study projects an additional 112 students over the next 5 years. Those numbers include real estate development data, and we thank Chairman Mulvaney, who just spoke so eloquently, and Jerry McGinsburg, as well as their board and staff members, for their cooperation to ensure that we do have the data we need for our projections. I would like to emphasize, similar to what Steve just said, Darien remains a highly desirable school system known for its academic excellence. How do we ensure Darien remains that highly desirable school known for its academic excellence? I want to start with who? With the people who work with our students 180 days each year. Darien has 815 staff members. There are many ways that we support our teachers and staff, but as RTM members, you will be familiar with the fact that we're in year 2 of our teacher's contract. As you may recall, that contract was structured with 3 goals in mind. The first was to address recruitment and retention. The second is to recognize the hard work and dedication of our teaching staff. And the third was to become more competitive at the lower end of the salary schedule to help attract new teachers to Darien. There are 489 teachers covered by that contract. In Darien, 33%, or 1/3 of our teachers turned over during the course of the previous contract agreement. Turnover was 64 teachers this year, 74 teachers last year, and 32 teachers the year before. That number 32 is a much more normal number that we're used to seeing. Teacher shortages is a nationwide phenomenon. It's particularly visible in science, math, foreign language instruction, and special education. Here in Darien, in addition to the contract provisions, additional work that we've identified to redress teacher shortages includes leadership opportunities to support career paths, continuing to expand our recruitment efforts, and working with substitutes to create teaching capacity and stability for students. This year, the board has recently approved a budget-neutral 0.4 FTE special education substitute for the current year. In special education, instruction must be delivered by appropriately qualified staff. Our goal is to provide relief to special education teachers who, while they were compensated, were substituting with time that they do not have. We're also looking at how our administrative structure supports our staff and students. I'll be back to you in January to talk about the Darien Administrative Contract, or the DAA contract, but in short, we are also experiencing administrative turnover, and as a result, have structured that contract to be more attractive and more responsive. As we navigate staff shortages, we ask for your support and your understanding of the importance of fully staffing buildings and classrooms for safety, for education, and for the integrity of the experience that we wish to deliver to our students. Other staff we put into place recently include mental health and security personnel. Last year, we successfully hired a director of mental health, Dr. Alicia Dadd. Our efforts and priorities continue to be focused on meeting the immediate and longer-term needs of our students and staff through direct provision of services for students, direct communication with families about mental health. Dr. Dadd has been circulating, talking to folks about mental health and difficult conversations you're having with children and how to support families and children. Collaboration with the town's mental health task force. John mentioned it earlier. Thank you to the selectmen for supporting that. Thank you to Marcy for serving on it. Behavioral health subcommittee and local organizations. At DHS, we implemented a wellness center this year. It's a place for kids to go and sit and do nothing to talk to each other. It is a tech-free zone. We also implemented Teen Talk, which is a counselor who sits at the, administered through Kids in Crisis, but who comes to the high school and sits at the high school. Research does show that people are best served when they ask for help. You want them to want to go and get it. So we provided Teen Talk so that kids who need somebody to go to have a place and a resource immediately in the schools. We also continue the implementation of our social emotional learning curriculum. We do an annual school climate survey, and underpinning all of that is professional development of our faculty and staff. The mental health of our students has been the board's top priority this year. It will continue to be. I thank you for your words about mental health, John. Also hired last year in close collaboration with the Darien Police Department were Leon Krolakowski, our Director of Security, and 6 school security officers. Safety and security has been a board priority for a number of years. Over the past two, we've replaced the emergency management system and made other security enhancements, conducted a KERMA safety audit, and are currently implementing security audit recommendations. We're conducting a self-assessment phase for the accreditation for the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and we continue to assess and plan for additional plant needs at each of our schools. We will be the first public K-12 school district to seek national accreditation for safety and security efforts. I'm proud to report that, as been mentioned, the beautiful Oxridge facility opened fully to students this August. If you've not seen the building, I encourage you to do so. Building highlights include tremendous natural light, beautiful, well-designed classrooms, a large, airy gym, thoughtful and innovative use of the space outside of the classrooms for various educational needs, a sustainable cafeteria, a serious playground, up-to-date security measures, and a cutting-edge general learning commons or library space. Similarly, work on the Henley Homes and Royal project continues. The goals of this project, to remind you all, were 1, eliminating the portable classrooms. Just to put an underline underneath that, the portable classrooms were supposed to go to the fire department for practice. They are not in good enough shape to make it over to the fire department. Secondly, right-sizing general and special classrooms. When I say special classrooms, that might mean classrooms for delivery of services such as speech or special education. I'm also talking about music and art rooms. The third is renovation or construction of the general learning commons or the libraries. There are 2 reasons for that. The first is the modernization of our facilities to reflect how libraries are used today and as was done at Oxridge. The second is because of the physical space itself. Homes needed a renovation. There's some odd classrooms that were put in at different points in time to accommodate excess capacity. And at Henley and Royal, the libraries are independent buildings that are poorly located and poorly built. There's no reason to keep them. Our fourth goal is updating mechanicals. It's close to 50% of the project costs. We're replacing multiple legacy systems, and most importantly, when we're finished, the buildings will have air conditioning for everybody. The project also includes security enhancements, site work, including drainage, parking, and at Henley, traffic circulation. The original construction date scheduled for this past August was postponed to June, the end of this coming school year, right now, so that we could rebid the work. The HHR committee has received those updated bids and is reviewing them. We'll be updating the various boards and town bodies in the coming days and weeks. Our thanks to the HHR committee for their hard work, particularly Chris Price, who leads it, and to Monica McNally and Jim Palin for their support of the committee as it's gone along. And John Zagrazzi, thank you for what you're about to do. Also, our thanks to Alan Adley and Kevin Monrette, who've represented the schools throughout and most importantly pivoted and got our kids into the schools safely when the construction date was changed. It is critical to continue to invest intelligently and proactively in our school facilities. Our current average cost per pupil for is $24,069, which is slightly below the average in our comparable district reference group. With those dollars, as you've seen in this small snippet of our schools, we provide top-notch facilities, staff, and educational programming. Of our students who graduated in 2023, 93.9% are attending a 4-year college, 1.5% are attending a 2-year college, and 1.2% are attending a college prep school. Of the remainder, 33 of our students report that they're planning to participate in programs such as living learning communities, research fellowships, ROTC scholarships and programs, academic support programs, and audition programs for theater and music. Our student performance across standardized testing continues to be exceptional, as reflected on SAT, AP tests, and the annual number of National Merit Scholars, which was 4, Commended Scholars 24, and Presidential Scholar Candidates 3. In the wake of COVID, we continue to be proud of Darien's scores, but also to look for where we might need to support students. For example, we continue to maintain literacy interventionists at our elementary schools. 502 of our students took 1,201 AP tests, with 92% of the tests receiving a score of 3 or higher. It remains an administrative goal to provide access to AP classes to more students. This year, our district was recognized as the best communities for music education by the National Association of Music Merchants Foundation. The creativity and sophistication of our musical and arts productions, including performances by chorus, band, orchestra, and theater, continues to entertain and delight. On the 19th, there is a holiday concert. If anybody is looking for an opportunity, I am told, though, that you have to get there early if you want a seat. That's pretty exciting. Middlesex Quiz Bowl remains a crown jewel. Our FCAC and SEAC athletes and sport teams won 9 divisional championships, 8 FCAC championships, and 6 state championships. While we praise our students for their successes and while we continue to value excellence, I want to take a moment to speak about other kinds of success. Not all of our students feature in the list of accolades above. We also honor the students who struggled to learn algebra but kept trying, the athletes who got on the field and lost, the students who forgot their lines or hit the wrong note. In order to prepare our students for a changing world tomorrow, as a district, we are working to uphold that is often the learning that comes with the struggle and along the journey that teaches us the most and makes us who we are. Speaking of journeys, and I'm almost done, moving forward into next year, some of our future challenges include recruitment and retaining of staff, the continued focus on mental health of our students, the fiscal year 25 budget with a high core base of expenses, increased special education funding needs as identification rates and costs rise locally and across the state while state funding stays stable, changing graduation requirements, K-3 reading legislation, play-based learning in our elementary schools, effective academic differentiation across grade levels, up and down, or up and sideways, transition work for our special education students who are 18 to 22 years old, the new kindergarten start date, appropriate and optimal use or non-use of educational technology for students and staff, and the next iteration of the strategic plan. Through it all of our students, will remain our top priority. In closing, I'd like to thank our administration led by Superintendent Alan Adley, Assistant Superintendents Amy Fedigan and Shirley Klein, Director of HR, Marge Sion, and Director of Finance, Rich Rudel, and our teachers and staff. I'd also like to thank our constituents for the opportunity to serve, and my board for the privilege and responsibility of serving as the chair. Thank you to each of you for listening tonight. I know it's been long already. On behalf of the board, I wish everyone a healthy, safe, and happy holiday season, and look forward to working collaboratively with all of you over productive discussions in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Nice job. Now, speaking on behalf of the Board of Finance, Chair Jim Palin.
I'm not sure why I'm always last here. So I guess I have 2 options. I can either put you all to sleep so that you decide not to vote on the Board of Ethics, or I can try to jazz you up so you have a ton of energy and you're going to be here for another half hour voting. So.
You have the floor.
Well, listen, I'll start off by, thank you all for approving the purchase of that one little circle and those couple documents, which Amy and Jack summarized extremely well. I'd be remiss if I didn't lean over to Monica and tell her, how do they just sum up perfectly in 5 minutes what we spent 16 months working on? But it was a big feat, I think, to get here, and thank you all for approving that. So I think the goal here, and we're in terms of efficiencies and getting more out of what we have, we're all relying on Jeremy here to help us with our presentation a bit. So the goal of my presentation tonight is to try to update you on where our finances are, give you some statistics on what I think are some important KPIs and things that the town is facing from a financial standpoint, and have you walk away with a little bit better understanding of what's happening to the grand list, what's happening to our taxes, where our taxes are getting spent, how we're paying for all these projects, schools, islands, and so forth. So I'd like to first start off by thanking my 6 fellow board members. you know, being chair of a board big committee, I'd be remiss if I did not say it wasn't stressful. There are indeed some lonely times, and I will say that all 6 of my fellow board members that I've had the opportunity to serve with, I consider them friends, they're colleagues, the people I can lean on when I have questions, the people I sort of meet for coffee, get guidance on things, and it's really, I think we function as some 7 of the best people that maintain relationships with all the different boards and really get stuff done. There's no joking around, there's no politics, it's all down to business, and we all sort of work together, I think, very cooperatively. And I think we work well with other boards. And I'd be remiss on the bottom of this page here, Jen Charneski, who's our finance director, who's not here tonight, but has been here for 8 years and served in a similar role before that. You know, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of data requests and a lot of things that our board puts together, and Jen really is able to take that, turn it around quickly, including things this afternoon for this presentation. And I want to really give a real shout out to her and her staff for everything they do to help our board function well. So echoing a little bit of what John talked about earlier, like we need to take stock in what we have and make sure we maintain what we have. The Board of Finance, we're not an operating board. So we're not teaching 4,677 kids. We're not overseeing the police, the parks, or anything like that. We have a little bit of a nebulous job where we're trying to take everything that our 2 policy committees or operating committees, the Board of Selectmen on the Town Services side and the Board of Ed on the education side, all of their wants and their priorities and so forth, and balance that with taxes so that we create what I call a portfolio of Darien. No one would invest in Darien if the only thing we had were great schools, and we do have great schools. No one would come to Darien if the only thing we had were great parks. And we do have great parks, and we're expanding. We're expanding from 225 acres of parks and open space with Great Island. That'll bring us up to close to 290 acres, right? Our home values are going up. But it's really the portfolio, the balance, and everything you see on the page here from our schools on the operating side, but also the capital side. Our home values. I'll talk a little bit more about the grand list. All you probably received letters in the mail over the last week or so telling you how much more wealthy you were, right? How much more your houses were worth. And everyone's probably thinking, well, what does that mean in my tax bill that I pay on July 1 and January 1? And people are trying to think, what have we committed to with Great Island? It's great, but what's it going to prohibit us or limit us from doing in the future? Public services, you know, John spoke to it. I can't thank enough all of our town staff and what they do. You know, working on the Great Island project with Monica, I got to probably spend more time with different departments and so forth than I've ever spent before. And it's amazing to see the amount of work that they do just in doing their jobs on a daily basis. And then the amount of work they do to support the 5 on the Board of Selectmen, the 7 on Board of Finance, Board of Ed, 100 people on the RTM, all the questions we know we're always putting in front of them. It's really amazing. I think it's a lot of what we have, the reason it works, a lot of the stuff on this page, the reason the lights turn on every day, the roads are plowed, people show up to fires, and police calls are because of our staff. And we have over 1,200 staff across this entire town. So I think we should keep them all in mind and thank them. You've seen this slide before. These are some of the things I focus on and when I think about like what makes Darien great and how do we continue to support the portfolio of things you saw on the prior page. We have a AAA rating from Moody's. It's the highest rating that's available. Even after what we went through in COVID, the bonding for the Oxford School, which is close to over $50 million worth of bonding from a proceeds perspective, the $85 million that we approved, that we paid for Great Island, and the $103 million of bonding that Moody's actually approved. With HHR, they reviewed everything. They looked at our bonding profile, they looked at our tax base, which I'll get to on a later page, and they reconfirmed the AAA rating. And I think we're in good shape to continue to invest in things that we need to, things that John mentioned earlier that he believes are priorities for this town. We need to continue to invest in infrastructure, and things like, Jill mentioned at the Board of Ed, additional capital investment that we have there. We have a $30.8 million fund balance. This is our rainy day fund, right? This is about we usually maintain around 17% of our annual budget for liquidity purposes, for the what ifs, some of which we saw during COVID. It's about $10 million over what we call our policy floor, which is 12%, which is a level the Board of Finance has said we never want to go below that. But we have generally been aiming for that 17% because that's where we think the AAA rating will be supported. There's some new guidance coming out of the state and the rating agencies that our committee is looking at now to see if it makes sense to possibly bring that down, given our tax base, which I'll talk about in a bit. Our current debt balance, including both long-term bonds and some of the short-term notes we issued to finance half of Great Island, is up by $100 million versus when I gave this speech last year. We went from 84 million to 184 million. But more debt does not necessarily mean more taxes. Our board, working with our finance director and our outside finance municipal bond advisor, over the last 6 or 7 years, when I joined the board, when John was chair 8 years ago, we began sort of a methodical approach to changing how we're bonding. Rather than level principal, we were doing level debt service. Small things, just words and so forth, but they have a dramatic effect of how we kind of stack near-term debt service on top of our budget. We've extended our debt in some cases. For Great Island, the portion of the debt that we did long-term was over 30 years. And that was thanks to an extension which the state passed, which allowed you to bond both school buildings and land acquisitions over 30 years rather than 20. So we're a little bit fortunate there. And our next bond issuance is going to come up in probably be March or April of next year. We timed that for when rates will start coming down. So we have that type of power to see into the future. From a mill rate perspective, 17.61, we are among the lowest mill rates for towns in the 169 municipalities in Connecticut. We've been there for a long time. In part, it's because we have a significant real estate base, 94% of which is residential and commercial property, but also because we're fiscally conservative. We're careful on what we spend, how we spend it, and we think and rethink, and we design good capital, good building committees, and we think long and hard about purchases like Great Island, like new schools, renovations, and so forth. So last year we had a mill rate of 17.61. The one thing I can tell you, which I usually can't tell you at this point in the year, is your mill rate will go down. Properties in Darien are up on average 29%. So that means if we don't spend more, your mill rate will go down by 30%. But the aggregate taxes will be the same on average, and I'll get to that in a bit, because on average does not mean it's the same for all. Demand for real estate has continued to soar. That's part of what drove prices up. We've seen greater price appreciation than a lot of our neighboring towns in Fairfield County and even in Westchester and so forth. But in the end, Darien, we survived the pandemic. We're in great shape, but we're always going to face new pressures that we need to be prepared for, make sure that we're designing budgets that can withstand, whether it's inflation or other things. I talked a little bit about the grand list, and I won't be as eloquent as John was on his short video here, but I want to drill down a little bit in the background. This is what last October the grand list looked like, and we set all your taxes for fiscal 2024. What I call real estate has like 6 different categories: residential, vacant land, most of which is developable or near developable; commercial properties, which are now in excess of $700 million, and Steve spoke to the amount that were in total over $300 million being added to the grand list in terms of appraised value, 150 per year for a couple years. That's 93.9% of our overall tax base is paid by property owners. Motor vehicle, 3.9%. And if you look in that second column from the left, 17,437 cars, motor vehicles in this town for 21,498 residents. A lot of cars. A lot of cars. Personal property, that's largely, as we see business activity expand, you'll see more personal property being taxed and so forth. So on the real estate side, let's break down that 93.9% a little bit more. 89% of it is residential. 8.7 is commercial, relatively small compared to a lot of our neighboring towns. 1.3 is vacant land, and 0.7 is other. Public utilities, Eversource, and so forth. Motor vehicles, about 4%, and personal properties at 2%. Next page. So what happened this year when everyone got letters in the mail and just before Thanksgiving? Well, every 5 years, the state of Connecticut requires that each municipality reappraise all of the real estate in their jurisdiction. And that's different than your motor vehicle and other ones which get reappraised every year. So on average, and you've seen some different numbers, 28 and 29, depends on how you're kind of cutting up the data and so forth, but on average, real estate, our homes, went up by 28% from 2022 to the 2023 revaluation. You'll see below it was relatively consistent, but there are some variations. When I look through the data set of about 6,800 properties, the low was a property going down by 56%, and the high was a property going up by 79%. So that top line, you can just reinforce the 27.8% on average of the 6,800 properties. That's what went up. We dug down a little bit deeper to look at how is the tax base shifting? Because 5 years ago and 5 years ago before that, when you look at the financial crisis and other sort of events, it was shifting around a lot. I divided the 6,800 towns up into 5 different baskets, 5 quintiles. The first 1,365 homes, going from those that have the lowest appraised value to the highest, are those homes that are appraised at, not assessed, at $768,000. Last year, they were 6.98% of the grand list, and this year they'll be 6.94. Not a big change. Only about 0.4% of the tax base shifted out of those 1,365 homes, and on average, that quintile went up by 27.6%. As you carry that down through these 5 different quintiles, you'll see a few common themes, right? There wasn't a major shift in terms of the tax base shifting out of one quintile or into another. Generally not more than 1% left a quintile or 1% moved into a quintile. And you can see that here that 42.85% of the homes in the town are valued at 2.106 or greater. And you can see the increases in those 5 pockets of homes increased from a low of 27.6 to a high of 31.9. Relatively consistent band. Overall spending. Here's what's been going on with our spending for the last 12 years. It goes up every year. Inflation goes up. 75% of what we spend money on are human capital, right? Because of contracts, because of seniority, because of normal types of GWI provisions, it goes up. 1 year, and this is based on the approved budget for fiscal 2024 that we're living in, not the actuals. 1 year, it's up by 3.6%, 5-year trend 2.8, 10-year 2.7. This is actual spending. Next page. The Board of Ed's the largest portion of that spending, representing about 75% of our total spending, and that's both capital, the debt service related to their capital versus the town. Student enrollment In this graph, in order to show the variations, it doesn't go down to zero, so it makes it seem like it's bouncing around a little bit more. But we've seen a little bit of movement in the last few years, a little bit of a decline pre-COVID, during COVID, things have been moving around and so forth, right? But we've seen a small decline, and as Jill mentioned, I think we're going to see 100 or more in the next few years. But we also don't have a ton of capacity in our schools. But there's, as Steve pointed out early, you don't see a ton of vacant lots sitting around Darien where you can build homes on. When you look at expenditures per student, those have continued to rise, a little bit faster than the overall spending, but there's a lot of fixed costs and there's a lot of uniqueness around students that it doesn't always match up. Next page. Our debt, which John asked me to look into, and I mentioned earlier, our debt's jumped from $84 million to $184 million. Highest it's ever been. Liz Mao would probably run down here and tackle me if she knew debt was over $100 million. But when you look at what you pay, what are we paying for that debt service? Most of it was issued at extremely attractive rates. The $50 million that we issued for Oxbridge, 1.4% was our average bond rate. And I mentioned in terms of amortizing over 30 years versus 20. And level debt service versus level principal. All those things, as we've added debt, have allowed us to have the debt service go up at a much lower rate. So with all this bonding, these projects, we're talking about debt service going from maybe 6% of our overall budget to maybe 7.5%. Still way far less than a lot of our peers. What's coming up? The original appropriation for HHR was $80 million. It's going to be a little bit more than that and so forth. John mentioned some possible drainage and sewer projects, right? We're spending about $1 million a year improving our sewers for the next few years, our sewer lines. We have a couple drainage projects, small projects such as fire trucks, which we have every couple years, and what we're going to start doing in Great Island. But I think we're well situated to be able to finance those if needed by bonding, and to do it in a way where it doesn't force our debt service to creep up as a percentage of too high as a percentage of our overall spending, because we don't want to be crowding out operating expenses, because in the end, taxes are not infinite. We do need to maintain, as I said on page 1 there, that top right-hand corner, low taxes. That's another reason why people move here. Next page, interest rates. This is just meant to give you a very high level of where rates are. Everyone's aware of what's happening with short-term rates. Municipal rates, we borrow the AAA rates. When you look at this graph, the blue line is a taxable, like the 10-year Treasury, just to give you an idea of kind of what's happening to taxable rates. The municipal rate, which we borrow at, which the black, gray, and light gray are the 30, 20, and 10-year indices for municipal bonds, you can see they're coming down. I didn't put the dot graph up here because I feel like I'm at work right here, but everything's pointing towards rates coming down. First cut is probably going to be somewhere at the end of first quarter or beginning of second quarter. So that should help as we get ready to enter the market. And you can see here on the lower line there where we ended up bonding Great Island and part of HHR was actually a tad bit lower than when we came back in front of you in June of 2022 to actually approve it, to approve the purchase of Great Island and all the bonding there. Next page, I talked a little bit about our fund balance, our rainy day fund, right? That's, we're up over $2.8 million versus last year. Why? The Board of Ed returned an $800,000 surplus, which they've consistently returned surpluses over the last few years. Our town treasurer knocked the ball out of the park in terms of investments, moving stuff into treasuries, moving stuff into STIF, moving stuff into a sweep account associated with it. So we generated a lot of additional investment earnings, and we're doing so this year. And we didn't need to draw on the $3 million that we had allocated last year when we passed the budget. We never actually had to use that because the revenues that we had were more than sufficient to meet the lower expenditures than we had budgeted for. But that excess funds is there, and we're really looking at that in terms of whether or not we should bring that down and use a little bit more of it for capital needs this year. High level, what did 2023 look like? On the top graph, let's talk about the revenues, right? Property taxes came in a little bit above average. Why? Because we assume this 25 basis points of uncollected taxes, and we don't necessarily bake into the grand list every last change for every last kitchen renovation and so forth. So we had about $500,000 of extra revenue there. In terms of, if you look at investment income and additional fees from the transfer station and so forth, that brought in an extra $2.4 million. State grants were a little bit lower than what we expected, but part of that was also just because we where we have those funds coming into the general fund. And so what was originally going to be a $3.8 million contribution from the general fund that you saw last year was at $28 million, was never used. So that's still in the general fund and what's helped kind of bring it up. We've had a couple of special appropriations that you all have approved, but it's still in there. On the expenditure side, the town came in $2.2 million below budget. The Board of Ed, although it says here they came in $800,000 below budget, they were in the upper $1.6 to $1.7 million of a surplus, and some of which they used to handle other priorities and things that they needed to take care of in that budget cycle. Debt service was spot on, and capital was what it was. Budget guidance. John started giving this, and I've kept up that tradition here. We, and I think the RTM, F&B looks at it in a similar way. We kind of break the budget up between core, doing what we did last year, and just paying for it again, and growth, what's new. Long term, my guidance in terms of what we should be focused on for our core services is 2.5%. Some of our contracts, you may have heard, are a little bit higher than that. But we can also keep finding efficiencies, and we need to keep finding efficiencies to keep that long-term tax growth rate, which keeps people moving here. Short term, for this year, haven't seen the budgets yet. We know there are some things that were implemented part-time, halfway through the year last year and so forth. So I think that's somewhere between 2.5% and 4%, and we'll comment after we hear the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed kind of debate their staff budgets. New growth, again, we said this year after year, we need to make a clear and compelling reason for implementing new programs, and we have to look at existing programs, whether it's on the school or the town side. We need to look at existing ones and make sure they still work. See if we can do them differently than we've been doing them for the last 5 or 10 years to find efficiencies. On the bottom of the page, grand list growth. Echoing Steve's comment again, I think we'll see 100 to 150 million of additional grand list, a larger denominator, if you will, over each of the next couple of years, which will help to offset some of those. But 100 to 150 million of additional appraised value in the grand list, on a grand list that's in excess of $12 billion, isn't that much. And then on the redistribution, we talked about when we looked at the quintiles, the change in the overall grand list and people's home values was pretty consistent when you began to break it down into 5 distinct groups. But still within those groups, and I'm sure if you turn to your neighbor, there's some that are their home values went up by much higher than 28%, and some that went up by much less than. And that's going to cause significant differences in people's ultimate tax bill that they get at the end of the year. If everyone's home only went up by 28% and taxes went up by 3%, then your taxes would go up by 3%. But if you're significantly higher than the average, that's going to add to your tax bill. If you're below, that's going to subtract from your bill. But again, this is baked into state statute, and the purpose of it is to rebalance and make it equitable. A couple closing thoughts here. New initiatives, I mentioned that. We need to drill down on these, and we need to make sure they make sense. They're necessary, whether they should replace existing initiatives. And we need to look at all the existing ones to make sure they all make sense by themselves. Oxford School is complete. It's beautiful. Hope you've all seen it. Great Island's been acquired. That's behind us. Saved $18 million and, spent a little bit more tonight to solve a couple things that we knew we had to, but less than what we expected. In total, there'll be over $140 million in investment between Oxford and whatever we do at HHR, right, where that ultimately shakes out. Let's carefully review new projects. Budget guidance is just that. It's designed to keep our town fiscally healthy, to keep taxes down, to keep us competitive versus our neighbors, and to make sure we can complete that whole portfolio. Myself and our board, we maintain a very active dialogue with the Board of Ed and with the Board of Selectmen. We try to keep a real pulse on everything that's happening on their committee so we can begin to formulate the approach to, what are we going to approve in April? What is the right balance of more spending for more priorities? Jill, and before her, Duke, and John, and before him, Monica, and Steve, friends with these are all my neighbors, these are all my friends, these are people I have active dialogue with, and they help keep me and my board up to date and everything that's going on. So there are no surprises. When things are coming down the pipeline, we're always having discussions about it. And I think that's why we're always prepared, and that's why you see us always work through the budgetary pressures, whether they're up, down, sideways, whether they happen during a budget cycle or off budget cycle. The way we get stuff done, like John mentioned, you're all our neighbors and friends, right? We all work together. We're all not getting paid for any of this. So we can all work together, I think, to make sure we make the best decisions here. The last bullet, I would just say, on capital projects, whether they're small, medium, or large, the key to successful capital projects is having a well-defined need, coming up with good cost estimates, assigning staff, or in some cases, building committees to look at them, to have a very organized process, a transparent process, and so forth. And that's where we generate sort of the best results, and those have generally resulted in the best projects in very cost-efficient manners. Process, process, process. And the more we can organize and get ahead of things, the better these projects will work out. That's it.
Thank you, Jim. I'll add just another sentence or two. Anything that's going on in this town that involves money is going to come through you. You approve the budget, you set the mill rate, and you approve traffic circles. So I just want to bring that before you. Now, I promised an opportunity to just give me a show of hands for those who will stay, and we'll run the vote again. We have to reach a majority. We needed 35 votes on one person, and it wasn't there for the Board of Ethics. So if you stay, then we have a quorum, and we can go ahead and vote it tonight. But you have to do one other thing. You have to focus on who it is you want to add to the Board of Ethics. And we have to try and get a majority. Okay? So if I could just see hands of who are going to remain. And I don't see a majority of folks here that are willing to do that, so we will put this on, no. No. Okay, I will accept a motion to adjourn. There's Schwartz and, yes, thank you. All those in favor, please rise.